Hi, I've been educating my audiences on the dangers of chronic stress from a health perspective, from a performance perspective, from an energy perspective. And I want to give an example based on my own experience because even though I've been talking about this subject for over 40 years, I have learned that I am still susceptible to some of these problems. And that's because chronic stress is so insidious. And I've just been involved in an important summit in which I've been meeting media representatives. And I'm basically talking to them about my story, my approach to be on their show, on their podcast, on their summit. It's a very intense experience, but one that I've embraced. And as I've gone through it, I've been pretty successful. But after the last session, I noticed something interesting. I was sitting in my living room and I was aware that my heart was palpitating, still beating hard. I thought that was strange. I was in a comfortable environment, but yet my body was responding very differently. And then I sat down to have lunch and I was aware that I was eating very rapidly and that I was attacking my food as if the food was my enemy. I put my fork down. I sat back and I said to myself, what's going on here? Quickly realizing that I was experiencing some of the same issues and symptoms that I talked to all of you about. I was still engaged in a stress response, even though there was no danger and there was no immediate stress. And it reiterated to me what I've shared with everybody else, and that's number one, that when we engage in some very stressful behavior, we condition our mind and our bodies to stay in that stress mode. And so the stress may be over, but our bodies don't know. We don't give our bodies that message. It's time to let go. You're safe. It also highlighted how we quickly get into what I refer to as autonomic dysregulation syndrome, in which we spend too much time in the stress response mode where our heart rate, blood pressure gets elevated, muscles stay tense. And what happens in the body is that when we activate the nervous system for stress too frequently, and so our bodies activate and adjust, that after a while, our baseline starts to creep up. And this could show up in higher blood pressure. It can show up in other symptoms, inflammation in the body, and contribute to chronic illness, as well as cognitive fog. So in that moment, when I let down my fork, I had to remind myself, Steve, you're no longer in danger, even though keep in mind that those experiences were not necessarily danger, but I was concerned about a good presentation, and I was concerned about the judgments of others, which are usually a couple of sources of stress. And so when I put down my fork, I did what I share with a lot of you. I went to my healthy internal parent, the part inside of me that I've developed that comes from a place of love, acceptance, compassion, support, care, and joy. And from that place, I told myself, you did a good job. It's time to let go. It's time to shift into the parasympathetic recovery mode. Let down your guard, breathe, take some time to do some meditation. But remember right now, everything is okay. And that is some message that you can give yourself, even if there's something happening in the future to be concerned about. Right here, right now, I'm okay, there's no danger. I needed to give myself permission to let go of that stress response. I needed to point out to myself that staying in the stress response was actually causing a response in my body that could lead to more serious situations physically. And so I actually walked away from the table. I got my biofeedback device, and in other messages to my audience, I've talked about biofeedback and how useful it is. It's a device that you can use to monitor your physiological state and feed that information back so that as you go through a relaxation exercise, it lets you know, that feedback lets you know when you're successful in really letting go, and use that information to encourage further letting go. And I sat down, I did only a 10-minute biofeedback exercise, but noticed after it was over that my jaw was more relaxed, that I had let go in my shoulders, that I helped myself move toward a parasympathetic recovery response. Now, it's not black and white. It's not that I'm in stress, now I'm in relax. It's a continuum. And so I realized that I took a step in the right direction. But throughout the day, I continued to remind myself, there's no danger, you can let down your guard. Because the other thing that I noticed is that the ongoing nature of stress, the insidious nature of stress, is that it sets up really a memory in our bodies of being in the stress response. So momentarily you can pay attention, you can let go, you can relax, but when you're not looking, your body is going to take you back into that stress mode until you break that pattern. And so I initiated another tool that I like to share with my audience, and that is one of ways of reminding myself to check in. And so I use going through a doorway, going through a portal, to remind myself whenever I do that, check in with my body. And for the rest of that day, every time I went through a doorway, I said, let me check in with my body. And sure enough, I noticed my jaw was back experiencing some tension, or my shoulders were a little bit raised. It took another few minutes to go through a relaxed breathing and let go, so that gradually I could let go a little bit more of that stress response that had been conditioned not only during that summit that I was involved in, but really and truthfully throughout my life. I engage in a lot of programs. I'm in front of the public a lot, and all of these situations engage my stress response. And my body keeps adjusting to that. And so on another level, it reminded me that I have to pay more attention to letting go of that stress response, and to reminding myself much more frequently that I'm okay, to be more accepting of myself rather than have the tendency to be judging myself, and to let go of what might be really false dangers of worrying about everybody else's judgments of me, and reminding myself that I have to be true to myself. And what's most important is that I'm okay with myself. And these are important lessons that I keep teaching myself even after all these years. And I'm encouraging you to begin practicing with yourself. So good luck with this, and pay attention to how activated your body is, and give yourself the opportunity for recovery and restoration of balance.